Sunny spells developing through the afternoon. Temperatures are around about average for the time of year, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. We will see this zone of rain working into the Western Isles and then across the Highlands through this evening. That will continue to track slowly southwards. Most places, though, having a dry evening. Notice the blue hue on the map here. A frost will form across parts of South Wales and southern England. Depends on the cloud and the fog, however, because there will also be a few thick fog patches, but easily some towns and cities dipping below freezing. Could be well below in some rural spots. Not as cold further north because we'll have more cloud, although still some frost likely as the cloud breaks late in the night in northern Scotland. A cloudy, dry day for many then on Saturday. Again, some sunny spells, a little bit of light rain over northern England at times. We may see a bit more rain for north coast of Wales and northwest England during the afternoon. The odd shower in the far north. Temperatures perhaps a touch lower than today's, 6s and 7s generally speaking. That thicker cloud and zone of light rain will continue to affect parts of northern England, North Wales for a time on Saturday evening. The odd shower in the far north of Scotland, but again, most places dry as we head into Sunday, and many will stay dry on Sunday as well. There will be some rain in the far northwest later, and it will get very windy on Sunday across northern Scotland. For most of us, turning just a touch milder. Goodbye.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Arlene Foster, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has set out a plan to boost the UK economy, taking the opportunity Brexit has provided to the country. In his speech, he outlined that Britain needs a more positive attitude to risk-taking. But over the Chancellor's speech looms the tax affairs of one of his predecessors, Nadeem Zahawi, with Rishi Sunak under growing pressure and reported to be furious. We'll hear the latest from our political reporter Olivia Utley and get the take from the Telegraph sketch writer Madeline Grant. Today is Holocaust Memorial Day, a day to reflect on the horrors of the Holocaust and all those people murdered by the Nazis. I'll be joined in the studio by the Israeli ambassador to the UK, and I'll be asking her what we all can do to challenge lingering anti-Semitism in our society. And I'll be talking to the former British ambassador to the US, Robin Renwick, about his new book on America's role in foreign policy and his career as a diplomat. It's a busy show, but still give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. But first, here's the news with Rhiannon.
Arlene, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2:01. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has insisted the best tax cut for the UK is to cut inflation as he sets out his long-term plans for growing the economy. With inflation close to a 40-year high, Jeremy Hunt has reiterated the government's pledge to halve it this year. He's promised to use Brexit freedoms to boost growth and reverse what he calls a declinism attitude towards the economy.
Some of the gloom is based on statistics that don't reflect the whole picture. Like every G7 country, our growth was slower in the years after the financial crisis than before it. But since 2010, the UK has grown faster than France, Japan and Italy. I want to ask you to help turn the UK into the world's next Silicon Valley. If anyone is thinking of starting or investing in an innovation or technology-centred business, I want them to do it here.
Jeremy Hunt's also confirmed today that HS2 will run to central London's Euston Station as planned. It follows reports the government was planning to scale back this leg of the project, instead terminating in a West London suburb. The rail link is costing over £44.6 billion, but supporting 22,000 jobs. Despite increasing costs due to soaring inflation, the Chancellor says it is a priority. An NHS hospital trust has been fined £800,000 after admitting failings in the care of a baby who died 23 minutes after birth. Nottingham University Hospitals Trust had their £1.2 million fine reduced after pleading guilty to providing unsafe care. It's the highest fine ever issued for failings in maternity care. Winter Sophia Andrews died in 2019 at the Queen's Medical Centre. Her mother, Sarah Andrews, says no financial penalty will bring Winter back.
We thank the judge and recognise the delicate balance she has made to impose this significant fine, which we hope sends a clear message to trusts managers that they must hold patient safety in the highest regard. Sadly, we are not the only family harmed by the trust's failings. We feel that this sentence isn't just for Winter, but it's for all the other babies that have gone before and after her.
A student nurse has appeared in court charged with planning a terror attack at an RAF base in North Yorkshire last year. 27-year-old Mohammed Farouk is also charged with possession of explosives after he was arrested outside a hospital in Leeds last Friday. A military bomb disposal team was called to the hospital and a maternity ward was evacuated as a precaution. He's due to appear at the Old Bailey next Friday. A British teenager whose far-right videos influenced the gunman in an American mass shooting has been sentenced to 11.5 years. Daniel Harris from Derbyshire posted extremist videos calling for what he called the total extermination of subhumans. The video was then shared by Peyton Gendron, who shot dead 10 people at a supermarket in Buffalo in New York. Manchester Crown Court heard the videos were also linked to Anderson Lee Aldrich, the only suspect in a shooting at a gay bar in Colorado. The family of a woman who lay dead in her flat for more than 3.5 years says she was abandoned and left to die by mental health services. Laura Wynnham, who had schizophrenia, was found at her flat in Surrey in 2021. Her family says they were unable to maintain contact as her condition caused her to believe they'd harm her. Laura's sister says social care teams turned a blind eye and forgot about her. Surrey County Council have offered their condolences and vowed to support the inquest. The King and Queen Consort have lit candles at Buckingham Palace to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. King Charles and Camilla spoke with Dr. Martin Stern, who survived a Nazi concentration camp during the Second World War. They also met Amuna Adam, a survivor of genocide in Darfur in Western Sudan. Today marks 78 years since Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp, was liberated. A day to remember all victims of genocide around the world. And a mathematician who was born in Russia and has spoken out against Moscow's war in Ukraine was the UK's biggest taxpayer last year, paying more than £487 million. The Sunday Times tax list reveals 100 of the UK's wealthiest people or families contributed to nearly £5.2 billion in tax last year. Denise, John and Peter Coates, the people behind Bet365, paid more than £460 million. Gymshark's chief executive, Ben Francis, is the youngest person on the list, paying £11.6 million. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Arlene with the briefing.
Hello and welcome to the briefing. Well, the Conservative Party chairman, Nadeem Zahawi, is facing increasing pressure over the scrutiny of his tax affairs as he authorises HMRC to discuss his financial arrangements. Zahawi had defended the error by saying the mistake was careless and not deliberate. But the boss of HMRC told MPs yesterday that there are no fines for innocent tax errors. Well, joining me now is Madeleine Grant, parliamentary sketch writer and columnist at The Telegraph. Madeleine, you were in the House of Commons yesterday and I was reading your piece and you were saying everybody was waiting to jump on the latest scalp. What happened yesterday, and tell us about what's going on today?
Well, actually, that I wrote about PMQs on Wednesday, which was an extremely dicey affair in which the leader of the opposition took every opportunity to twist the knife over the Zahawi issue, but also, I think, to try to weaponise that against Rishi Sunak's own personal circumstances, mentioning his wife and her tax status. So there was a sense that, they were really going hell for leather on that, and that they're determined to make as much kind of political capital out of this as they possibly can.
And, there is a sense, Madeleine, isn't there, that we're coming to the end of this administration, and obviously Labour will use all of the opportunities that are presented to them. But I said earlier on that Rishi Sunak was reported to be furious over Nadeem Zahawi's tax difficulties. Have you heard anything in relation to that?
Well, it seems that, they have kept to the official line that they want to wait for the conclusion of this investigation into Zahawi's tax affairs. But I think that there is a general feeling that they have been softening on that point. And also that, as you referred to in your opening statement, the situation is really deteriorating for Zahawi. There were the words from the head of HMRC. There's also on Question Time last night the sight of the former Tory party chairman, Jake Berry, very publicly throwing Zahawi under the bus and saying that, he should resign immediately. So not even wait for the conclusion of the report, which is, all of this puts severe pressure on Number 10 to revert from the official line, and generally, that it has become the story. The media have really got their teeth into it, as you would expect, and the Chancellor delivered a speech this morning, but it was still very much being overshadowed. All of his sort of ambition for the UK economy, that was being overshadowed by discussions of Zahawi. So, in that respect, it seems like the original line is looking much less likely to hold than it would have been earlier in the week.
And of course, you will know, Madeleine, that the media like nothing better than talking about rich politicians. And I suppose that's the difficulty, isn't it, for Rishi Sunak, that if he acts against Nadeem Zahawi, does that bring his own personal wealth into the frame again? And does he look weak by not acting in the way that many have expected him to?
That's a really good question. I think, to be honest, that there's no good outcome. Whatever he does, there would be his detractors would make the same point. I think that the official line that you're waiting for due process, and you stick to it. I think that has something to recommend it, because I don't really like this. The media, it's quite obvious that they often go into scalp hunting mode, and they are relentless until they get the outcome they want. And it seems to me that many journalists almost feel that they should be the story, and for them victory is when something happens in politics, which seems to be quite like, I don't know, putting your hand on the scales in a way that I think is a bit much. That's just my opinion. I think that whatever the Prime Minister does, he would be criticised for it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Madeleine, for joining us. We're going to talk about something different now. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, as Madeleine referred to, has outlined his plan for the economy in a major speech this morning. He rejected calls from allies of his predecessor, Liz Truss, who are calling for tax cuts. And he said that the best possible tax cut that can be made is a cut to inflation. Mr Hunt has reportedly told friends that he wants to model himself on another former Chancellor, Geoffrey Howe, by being honest about the challenges which the country faces. Well, I'm joined now by GB News political reporter Olivia Utley, who was at that speech this morning. So putting himself out there, saying he wants to be Geoffrey Howe, I mean, that could split the Tory party, could it not?
Well, absolutely. I mean, everything about her speech really could split the Tory party, because this is, to be fair to Jeremy Hunt, the first time that we have actually seen a government plan for growth. This is what people have been waiting for ever since Rishi Sunak first came to power, really. And what he's talking about is turning Britain into the next Silicon Valley, by linking up our fantastic universities, unleashing Britain's genius, making the government making the right circumstances for investors to invest, etc. There weren't a huge amount of details apart from sort of tackling the productivity problem. He talked about a new programme to get older people back into work. He talked about a local wealth creation fund to help level up areas that are left behind. So that was a sort of, we got some bare bones of what his plan for economic growth is. But, and it's a big but, on the taxes front, he just continued to defend his position not to lower taxes. And there are plenty of Conservative backbenchers and general members of the public who feel that the only way to level up, the only way to be a high-growth economy is to lower people's taxes and to lower corporation tax. That would seem like the obvious way to make it easier for businesses to grow. But he is sticking with the line that the top goal is to cut inflation, and the only way to cut inflation is to keep taxes where they are for now. He's sort of pushing a spin on that as he'll be the new Geoffrey Howe, and he's just being honest with the people about how difficult everything is for Britain, and there'll be a way further down the line to lower taxes and unleash Britain's genius. But essentially, the tax line which he's holding firm to is really deeply unpopular among big factions of the Tory party.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's one thing to be honest, and I think we all would like politicians to be honest, and he's trying to make a virtue of all of that. But surely people want to have aspiration and hope that things are going to be better. Was there much of that in the speech today?
Well, in some respects, yes. He talked up Britain in a way that we haven't seen for a while. Rishi Sunak's first speeches were all about just how difficult the position that we are is, and hopefully we'll sort of find a way out of it. Here we did see some sort of vision for a rejuvenated Britain, but it mostly was about harnessing big tech, essentially.
Yes.
He talked about unicorns, big tech companies which are valued at over £1 billion, and it seemed to be about making the conditions right for a company like Amazon or Apple to be founded in the UK. That's what he mentioned, which is a big ambition, and it was sort of hopeful and optimistic. But for the ordinary person at home struggling with the cost of living crisis this winter, it probably doesn't fill you with hope.
And I'm going to be speaking to an MP about one of the issues, which is childcare and the cost of childcare later on in the show. But his 4 points are enterprise, education, employment, everywhere. Of course, we had 5 points from the Prime Minister earlier on. They seem to be fascinated by having all of these points. I mean, the point is, to go back to points, is he really appealing to people right across the country, or is this just a message for the markets, as it were? Because it seemed to me when I was watching him earlier on, he was incredibly dull. He wasn't exactly, fired up about the fact that we had these Brexit freedoms and we were going to do more.
Yeah, I think that the tone he struck, it did very much feel as though he was talking more to the people who were in that room, in the Bloomberg building. Fantastic, exciting new building in the city of London, filled with all of these top executives from big tech companies. And that was very much the audience that he was addressing. It didn't feel like he was talking to wider Britain. As for your point about all of these sort of pillars, his four strands for levelling up Britain, which are slightly different to Rishi Sunak's 5-point plan for levelling up Britain, I'm not sure it gives a kind of clarity of message.
No.
And we know that at the moment the Conservatives need to find a reason for people to vote Conservative in the next election. Labour is so far ahead in the polls that there's no way the Conservatives can sort of rest on their laurels. They need to find one clear message about why you vote Conservative in the next election. And it feels as though they've muddied the waters a bit with all of these different pronged, pillared strategies.
Yeah, he did have the 4 points of the Prime Minister's beside him as he made his 4-pillar speech today. But there was a Cabinet Away Day yesterday. Do you think that that's planning for an election, or what do you think that the focus of that would have been yesterday? Cohesion would have been a good start, I would suggest.
Yes. It sounds like it was a strategy meeting to lay out what the plan is, what the attack lines will be for Labour going into the very beginning of this election period. But we know that there are cabinet splits, high-level cabinet splits on the tax issue in particular. And until the Conservatives have worked out what they're going to do about that, it's going to be very hard for Isaac Levido, who was there, the election guru, said that there is this narrow route for the Conservatives to election victory. And he suggested that the Labour lead isn't as baked in as you might expect. Sure. But if they're to find this narrow path to victory, then they're going to have to come to some agreement on the one big sort of Conservative issue that's blighting the whole party.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in, Olivia. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom as we mark Holocaust Memorial Day. And later, it's an ambassadorial special today. I'll be speaking to Lord Renwick, the former British ambassador to the United States. He's going to discuss the release of his new book. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Most places are going to be dry today. A fair bit of cloud around, but some sunny spells coming through. Most of us will have a dry weekend as well, thanks to this area of high pressure anchored out to the west. It is in control of our weather, but at times weather fronts will drift in from the northwest. This one approaching the Western Isles will bring a little bit of rain here late in the day. We do have the odd light shower elsewhere, but they're fading out and most places will be dry. As I said, quite cloudy, but we've got some breaks in the cloud. North Wales, northern England, and down the eastern side we'll see a bit more sunny spells developing through the afternoon. Temperatures are around about average for the time of year, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. We will see this zone of rain working into the Western Isles and then across the Highlands through this evening. That will continue to track slowly southwards. Most places, though, having a dry evening. Notice the blue hue on the map here. A frost will form across parts of South Wales and southern England. Depends on the cloud and the fog, however, because there will also be a few thick fog patches, but easily some towns and cities dipping below freezing. Could be well below in some rural spots. Not as cold further north because we'll have more cloud, although still some frost likely as the cloud breaks late in the night in northern Scotland. A cloudy, dry day for many then on Saturday. Again, some sunny spells. A little bit of light rain over northern England at times. We may see a bit more rain for north coast of Wales and northwest England during the afternoon. The odd shower in the far north. Temperatures perhaps a touch lower than today's, 6s and 7s generally speaking. That thicker cloud and zone of light rain will continue to affect parts of northern England, North Wales for a time on Saturday evening. The odd shower in the far north of Scotland, but again, most places dry as we head into Sunday, and many will stay dry on Sunday as well. There will be some rain in the far northwest later, and it will get very windy on Sunday across northern Scotland. For most of us, turning just a touch milder. Goodbye.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Well, people around the country are being asked to put a candle in their window this evening to remember those Jews murdered for nothing more than their faith and background, as Britain marks Holocaust Memorial Day. It also coincides with the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, where over 1 million people passed under the infamous gates of the concentration camp. In total, over 6 million would tragically lose their lives at the hands of state-sponsored murder. Well, I'm really delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by Her Excellency Sipi Hotufeli, I hope I said that right, the Israeli ambassador for the United Kingdom.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for coming in on this very significant day. As I said, it's 78 years since the Auschwitz liberation. Why is Holocaust Memorial Day still so important to be remembered today?
I think because as time goes by, we lose the survivors. And when we lose the survivors, we don't have this first-hand testimony. And I think nothing is more important than listening to a survivor story, because this connects you to the feeling of the horrors, and you can understand how it feels to be a normal Jew living in Europe, having normal life, and then in one moment, everything is disappearing, and you're getting into hell, basically. You're moving from paradise to hell. And I think, for me, the most significant experience I had as a child, when I was 16, I went to Auschwitz myself.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was surrounded by 2 survivors from the Holocaust, that it wasn't just going into, a museum or a live evidence for the horrible things that happened there, but it was actually listening to a person that experienced life in Auschwitz and telling us...
It must be so difficult for people to go back there.
It was very, very difficult, but I think it was a necessity for us as young Israelis, being so confident about the Jewish state, to understand how the world could have been if Israel would have existed 78 years ago, if they had this refuge to have their own Jewish homeland. And I think it's important today, especially with modern anti-Semitism. So some people till today feel not safe when they go, let's say, to British campuses. Some Jewish kids, they give a testimony that they don't feel comfortable. Some, unfortunately, there were over 2,000 incidents of anti-Semitism in the streets of the UK, all around the country. And you can see even physical violence, not just expressions of anti-Semitism. And I think the awareness should rise, because many people, as we, as the years go by, they just move on. And they feel like this horrible chapter in history, they don't want to open it. And I think they must.
And you mentioned the horrible chapter in history, and I suppose for many it is so painful. And you mentioned the survivors there and what a key role they've been playing in teaching today's generation about what happened. And I know, for example, Ziggy Schipper, he died last week, so he was 93, a survivor. And there are others who are passing away, and so as you rightly say, they're passing into history. How will we be able to talk about that after those survivors pass on? What will be the mechanism for us to understand?
So it will be a huge challenge, I think. I think the fact that there is the Spielberg project, the Yad Vashem project of taking those testimonies into videos. That the fact that people give their own testimony, I think it's powerful. It's not the same as listening to a live person, but it's better than not having those documented testimonies. And I think I would say, modern ways to teach the Holocaust. So I will share with you my experience. So yesterday I went to Imperial War Museum, and their Holocaust exhibition is absolutely outstanding. I mean, the fact as one of the people who were shaping the exhibition was telling me, the Holocaust is presented usually in black and white.
Yeah.
And it keeps you away from it. I mean, you're very distanced from those old pictures. And then you go into this exhibition and finally everything is in vivid colors.
Yeah.
And then you see those people that had normal life, living their Jewish, flourishing life, and then how it was destroyed. You see Kristallnacht, you see the process of demonization of Jews. So I think that going through modern ways of teaching and educating is also an important tool to do that.
Yeah.
And I think as many as possible ways to do that. I know that the British government is very committed to create the museum next to Parliament.
Sure.
So you need to be accessible to this information.
To as many people as possible.
Yes, and you need to bring school kids.
Every year the Historical Educational Trust have a theme for Holocaust Memorial today. And I think this year's theme, if you don't mind me saying so, really struck me. Ordinary people. So ordinary people that turn a blind eye, ordinary people that get involved in direct violence and anti-Semitism leading to what we know happened. That's a very powerful, I think, tool, isn't it, to talk about ordinary people?
Yes, because then it's you and me.
Yes, exactly.
It's not those monsters, the Nazis and those poor Jews. It's really you and me, because one of the things I think we all should understand that it was really ordinary people. One of the biggest authors that was writing, one of the survivors, he's not with us anymore, Ketzetnik, he used to say, when people say Auschwitz was on a different planet, in a way they deny.
Yes, they're othering it really, aren't
so,
they?
No, it happened here in Europe. It happened with big help of other European countries. It wasn't just a German's project. It was initiated by Nazi Germany, but then so many people took part in that. And of course, the fact many people just ignore the fact that all the Jews are gone. Yeah. A world without Jews is a very sad world. A world where racism against 1.5 million kids that were perished just for being Jewish. I mean, this is something that we need to remind ourselves as a big alarm.
And I had the privilege of being in the House of Lords chamber when we were debating the Holocaust, led by Lord Pickles. And Lord Glassman made an absolutely brilliant speech talking about, he went back to Ukraine, he went to see where the Jews used to be in Ukraine, he went to a synagogue on a Friday, and he was told, Jews all gone, Jews all gone. And that really brought it home to me that there wasn't even a Jewish community there anymore. And that's what happened across Europe, of course.
Yes, I think the fact they destroyed a culture, tradition, everything. It was about getting rid of Jews and getting rid of Judaism and getting rid of Jewish values and Jewish spirit, all the things that the Western society today cannot live without.
Well, thank you for being here today on this very important day. I know you're incredibly busy, so thank you for coming into the studio.
This is my duty, and just listen to the survivors and just experience as much as you can to learning history.
Thank you so much. That was the Israeli ambassador to the UK. And coming up, I spoke to Conservative MP Siobhan Bailey about the need for childcare reform. We'll also be talking to Lord Renwick, the former British ambassador to the US, about his new book. But first, here's Rhiannon with the news headlines.
Thank you, Arlene. It's 3:30, your top stories, 2:30, I should say, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has insisted the best tax cut for the UK is to cut inflation as he sets out his long-term plans for growing the economy. With inflation close to a 40-year high, Jeremy Hunt has reiterated the government's pledge to halve it this year. He's promised to use Brexit freedoms to boost growth and reverse what he calls a declinism attitude towards the economy. The Chancellor has also confirmed today HS2 will run to central London's Euston Station as planned. It follows reports the government was planning to scale back this leg of the project, instead terminating in a West London suburb. The rail link is costing over £44.6 billion. Despite increasing costs due to soaring inflation, Jeremy Hunt says it is a priority. An NHS hospital trust has been fined £800,000 after admitting failings in the care of a baby who died 23 minutes after birth. Nottingham University Hospitals Trust had their £1.2 million fine reduced after pleading guilty to providing unsafe care. Winter Sophia Andrews died in 2019 at Queen's Medical Centre. A British teenager whose far-right videos influenced the gunman in an American mass shooting has been sentenced to 11.5 years. Daniel Harris from Derbyshire posted extremist videos calling for what he called the total extermination of subhumans. They were shared by Peyton Gendron, who shot dead 10 people at a supermarket in Buffalo in New York. Manchester Crown Court heard the videos were also linked to Anderson Lee Aldrich, the only suspect in a shooting at a gay bar in Colorado. And a student nurse has appeared in court charged with planning a terror attack at an RAF base in North Yorkshire last year. 27-year-old Mohammed Farouk is also charged with possession of explosives after he was arrested outside a hospital in Leeds last Friday. A military bomb disposal team was called to the hospital and a maternity ward was evacuated as a precaution. He's due to appear at the Old Bailey next Friday. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. It's back to Arlene Foster with the briefing in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already depressed.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Well, amidst the cost of living crisis, there is much talk of soaring food bills and volatile energy prices. However, what about childcare costs? Liz Truss had planned to tackle the rising costs as part of her economic plan. But those ambitions have reportedly been shelved by the new government. Earlier this morning, I spoke to Conservative MP Siobhan Bailey to hear why she's urging the Chancellor to make childcare reform a central plank for the upcoming budget. I first asked her about her concerns over the seeming lack of focus on childcare by the government.
Childcare is now what I call a kitchen table issue. It's really being discussed every day because of the chaos it's bringing. Parents and grandparents are being dragged in, and it's also impacting employers. We know we've got 1.2 million vacancies in the country, and parents are not able to work at full tilt, and they're telling us it's largely about childcare. So there's a few issues, but the first one is cost. We know that we are one of the highest, we have some of the highest childcare costs in the world, and we're trying to look at ways of bringing those costs down. The second thing is just bureaucracy, and we've got about 8 different schemes in this country. It costs the country between 5 and 6 billion quid, but none of the schemes are really sort of functioning well. So we're wanting to try and simplify matters, and in my view, make sure that we've got flexibility and parental choice. And then the third thing is this: the employers. Employers really want to make sure that they've got people working fully productive, and they want to provide the flexibility. But when the state's childcare schemes are not supporting that, in my view, things need to change.
And yes, I was really struck by the fact that our childcare system here is amongst the highest in the world. I think it's 3 times the OECD average cost of childcare here. And if you're a 2-parent family and you're out working and you need to access childcare, it is a real cost, actually in some cases the highest cost that a family can have. How can we tackle that, and why do you think the costs are so high here in the UK?
Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we are. It's described to me as a second mortgage for many families, and actually a cost that parents just cannot afford to lose. So we know with cost of living, people are not going out for dinners. They're cutting the cloth slightly differently. But these are costs that are having to be spent and are rising. We've got a few different issues. Partly, we know that there's been sort of a 50% drop in childminders. There's been a number of closures for nurseries. So there, parents will tell us around the country, provision is patchy, and the childcare sector is actually struggling to recruit itself, so their own costs are going up. We've got some really good schemes, some good offers. So we've got like sort of 3 hours, 15, 30 hours free, but the childcare sector are telling us that it's underfunded actually at their end, so they're having to put additional costs onto parents. And there's other schemes like the tax-free credits and things, and that's hugely underused because of the bureaucracy. Childcare provision of universal credit is only 13% of eligible parents are using that. So even though that's a good offer, parents are not able to take that up. So I think it's a bit of a myriad of things. But my main message to the Chancellor, unfortunately, he's on the hook because he's got the next big event with the spring budget, is you cannot say nothing about this. And while I completely understand that there's not a lot of money flying around at the moment, and we've seen the borrowing figures recently, this is something that we absolutely do need to think about and tackle.
And finally, Siobhan, I mean, this isn't just about families. It isn't just about providing care. It's about economic growth, isn't it? Because we want people to be able to go to work and have their children in safe childcare. Liz Truss recognised that. She's seen it as one of the 8 supply chain changes that needed to be made. Do you think the Chancellor and, importantly, the Prime Minister get it, that they recognise that childcare is an important issue? And you've already said that you're going to keep on battling for this. I'm with you on that, having had 3 children of my own and knowing what it's like to deal with childcare. It is such a critical issue, isn't it, Siobhan?
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, and when it goes wrong, I tried to take my daughter to nursery on the way to Parliament the other day, and they turned her away because she had gunky eyes. And I just stood there and said, "I've got to go to a select committee." It really is, and that's happening day in and day out for lots of different problems, not just illness with a little one. But it's a real issue. I think whenever we get to a stage where both parents need to work to pay a mortgage, to pay rates, to pay fees or bills, we're always going to need to have some form of childcare support. So in my view, it's got to work. I do think the government and the individual ministers, as high as the Chancellor and the PM, understand this. Liz Truss spent years and years and years working on this and does really care. People understand it, but it's whether we can get to the point where we've got a really good package to show the changes. So yeah, thanks for giving the support and the pressure here as well.
We'll be watching if you're successful in March when the budget comes out. Thanks, Siobhan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That was Siobhan Bailey, the MP, arguing for more attention to be paid to childcare costs. Now, with the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the rise of China and the challenge to American power, and indeed battles for influence in Africa and elsewhere, the competition of great powers appears to be back. And that makes the role of diplomats in trying to manage and resolve international conflicts and crises as important as ever. This week, Lord Robin Renwick, the former British ambassador to the United States and South Africa, has published his latest book. A True Statesman marks 30 years since the first President George Bush left office, tracing the last 3 decades of foreign policy and delves into whether the United States is an indispensable nation in the world. Well, I'm delighted to say that Lord Renwick joins me now in the studio to discuss his book, and thank you for bringing this in. I've obviously been looking at it since then. A True Statesman, it's called. And I just was, when I was reading through it, noticed the quote that you put at the front of the book from George H.W. Bush. And it says, "If the United States does not lead, there will be no leadership. If the United States instead turns inward, there will be a price to be paid later." That's pretty prophetic, isn't it?
That was absolutely prophetic, and especially about Ukraine, for instance. Because we are where we are, because in 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Obama was a great domestic policy president, but he didn't want to do foreign policy. He didn't want America to continue to act as the world's policeman. So the Western response was extremely feeble to that invasion. Russia got away with it. And that's why he's done it again. If Bush had been president, I can absolutely promise you there would have been a very strong American and Western reaction to the first invasion of Ukraine. So there's a lesson to be learned in this book, I think, apart from the fact that it's a sort of homage to a great man and a personal friend. And if we look around us today, I can't see a world statesman, I'm afraid, of the calibre of this one.
Yes, Henry Kissinger remarks on the front of your book what we have been missing, and I think that's quite true as well from a statesman himself.
What he means by that, Kissinger too, is what we're missing is Kissinger-style diplomacy, secret diplomacy with our adversaries, even when we're in a very hostile relationship with Russia, as we were, and at times with China. Kissinger, and indeed George Bush, always tried to keep channels open to look for solutions when things changed, as soon as solutions became possible. Now, at the moment in Ukraine, there's no early end to this fighting, but we still have to look for a way, for a moment, when we can stop it, because, nobody can afford to see this go on indefinitely.
Of course, diplomacy is the art of the possible, as you well know, better than anybody. And the other thing that you point to from George H.W. Bush was that he very much believed in that personal touch, that personal diplomacy, taking a lead in terms of doing what he had to do.
He had wonderful personal relationships with the other world leaders, all of them. I mean, Thatcher and John Major, but people like President Mitterrand, also Helmut Kohl, and all the Arab leaders. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, he got a coalition of all the Arab nations to join in throwing him out. But he said, nevertheless, if the US hadn't taken the lead, Saddam would still be in Kuwait.
Sure.
But the other lesson is that the Bush family, not just George Sr., but George Jr. too, were inclusive politicians. They made huge inroads in terms of appealing to the Hispanic minority especially, also to the black minority. They were the opposite of Trump. None of them voted for Trump. They didn't believe in divisive politics or in attack dog politics. And if the Republicans want to win back the White House, they're going to have to go back to Bush-style inclusive politics, because they'll never win people in the centre ground by continuing such divisive style.
Yeah, and that divided nature of politics in America now, it's miles away from what you experienced when you were there as the United Kingdom ambassador, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, there used to be huge friendships between Republicans and Democrats, and George Bush had very strong friendships on the Democratic side.
Yes.
Now, that is breaking down, or has been breaking down. It's much more divisive now and adversarial. Now, that's not what a lot of Americans want. They want to see some bipartisan agreements. And I'm glad to say that over the war in Ukraine, there is bipartisan agreement. Both sides have voted through Congress huge amounts of assistance to Ukraine, military and every other kind too, So that is a bipartisan approach.
And I suppose it's about trying to understand why Obama and then latterly Trump didn't want to be the world's policeman, quote unquote, but surely they have to recognise their position in the world as this huge nation.
Well, you're driven back to it, you know. I mean, if we hadn't taken the line we've done about Ukraine, if America hadn't said, right, we're going to help the Ukrainians every way we can to make sure they're not wiped off the map of Europe, which was Putin's plan, then they would have been, because we do not, among the Europeans at the moment, have sufficient unity, resolution, or spending on defence to be able to stop this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So American leadership, whether we like it or not, remains fundamentally important. And it's very important for the American leader to understand, as Bush did, that there are moments when America really has to step up. I mean, the threat to Taiwan, too, is another good example. As long as America is making it clear that they would not allow it to happen, China is very unlikely to try to do it.
Sure.
But otherwise, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've concentrated a lot on the United States because your book is about the great George H.W. Bush. But of course, that's only part of your career. You spent a lot of time in Africa as well, and you were the ambassador to South Africa. You spend time there still. Tell me what your view is of what's going on in Africa, and in particular in South Africa at the moment.
Well, in South Africa, it's a tragedy. It's a very sad story. I was there in the glory days. You know, Mandela was a great friend and partner, and, you know, working with de Klerk to get one person, one vote. Everybody was very, very hopeful about the future. And the African National Congress in those days had great leaders who were not interested in power and corruption and goodness knows what. Today, it's the opposite. I mean, it remains a wonderful country with a terrible government, because the government, all it does is sort of feed itself. It doesn't look after the people generally. And, you know, to have a major country running out of electricity half the day, every day, is just a catastrophe. And it's a self-inflicted catastrophe, because they wanted it all to be controlled by them, and they didn't want any electricity to be generated by private business and the miners and so on. Otherwise, the problem would be solved. So it's, you know, they obviously are going to suffer in the next elections, but they certainly deserve to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming into the studio. It's been fascinating
to
listen to you. And as I say, the book is A True Statesman. It's a book about George H.W. Bush, and it's got some fabulous recommendations on there. But Robin, thank you for coming into the studio
very much
to discuss it.
Thank you.
So uncertainty has emerged about the terminus of HS2 and forcing the Chancellor to play down reports that the terminal in central London could be scrapped entirely. Well, this is the planned route as it currently stands, phase 1 stretching from Birmingham to London. But The Sun has now reported that the travellers to the capital may have to stop in the suburbs at Old Oak Common rather than carry on to Euston. The Chancellor, however, has come out this morning to say he can't see that happen. Let's have a listen.
Don't see any conceivable circumstance in which that would not end up at Euston. And indeed, I prioritised HS2 in the autumn statement. We have not got a good record in this country of delivering complex, expensive infrastructure quickly. But I'm incredibly proud that for the first time in this last decade under a Conservative government, we have shovels in the ground, we are building HS2, and we're going to make it happen.
Well, I'm joined by GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins. He's up in Houston, and you're going to tell us how this has all been going down with everyone up there.
Yeah, Euston, we have a problem, but Jeremy Hunt says nope, HS2 will be running here. So certainly for some people here that have had to go through a lot of disruption over the last 10 years with businesses, homes being demolished. Just behind me there used to be a huge hotel that was knocked down for HS2. They'll be over the moon at this news, if indeed that is the final statement from the government on this one through the Chancellor, that HS2 will run to Euston. Because this morning when that news broke that it may be 5 years, instead of arriving here in 2033 it'll be 2038, or it might not even happen at all, everyone was around this area, and certainly Labour-run Camden Council were saying, where's this uncertainty come from? In fact, they issued a statement saying these reports represent more unacceptable uncertainty. They say HS2 construction has left a deep scar on our communities. They will have to endure years of disruption for absolutely no benefit at the end of it. They must see the new homes, green spaces and opportunities they were promised. And those kind of things in that statement are part of the redevelopment of this station. The vision is that there will be 17 high-speed trains per hour running out of a huge station concourse. In fact, the biggest in the UK. It'll be 20% bigger than Trafalgar Square, and it will mean twice as many passengers in peak time come 2033 will be able to travel from this station. So a massive increase in capacity for the rail network. It will also free up the West Coast main line. And of course, there's all the developments around that, new businesses, new homes, green spaces, etc. And 10 brand new platforms operating from a site behind me. It's like a huge footprint around the current Euston station. It's about 60 acres that are currently being redeveloped. And so the disruption for the local community here, we've been talking to people who live in the buildings to my left. They've been talking about the noise, the air, the dust that's been floating in the window. And to be fair to HS2, they've tried to compensate for that disruption. There's one lady we were speaking to who showed us that they've fitted ventilators next to the window to her lounge so that the air she breathes in can be a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier for them. Another one we spoke to, though, earlier, a few doors down, she said HS2 hasn't really been much of a disruption and we've been managing to live with it. So some people in this area, it's fair to say, have lived with HS2, but a lot of people haven't been able to. And when they heard these reports this morning, they were thinking, well, what's the point? What have we gone through all this disruption for the past few years for that? But it seems that according to Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, it is going ahead for now, and HS2 will run from Euston here in central London.
And of course, Paul, it's not just communities around Euston that have had to endure the difficulties. There are many communities right up towards Manchester who are very concerned about what HS2 is going to do to the countryside. And as you know, there are many Tory MPs as well that have said that they want it scrapped.
Yeah, and there are still calls for it to be scrapped. The government's adamant it is going to go ahead. There are some negotiations to be had over the exact route that runs through the country, but many homes have had to be compulsorily purchased by the government. Many people have had to change their lives forever in order for this, according to the government, essential piece of infrastructure to be put in place that will connect Birmingham to London, saving you around about half an hour on the journey and then an hour from London to Manchester. And spare a thought as well for the people of Leeds, who at the start of this project, when it was announced, it was going to there was going to be a leg that was going to run off to Leeds, and that would have connected Leeds to London. You would have been able, instead of 2.5 hours from London to Leeds, it would have been about an hour and a half. That was then scrapped very controversially, given the government's big noises when it comes to talking about the Northern Powerhouse Rail, etc. So the people of Leeds won't be getting HS2, but the people in Manchester should hopefully be getting HS2. But indeed, a lot of people, including, as you say, Arlene, Conservative MPs, very unhappy with the fact it's going to run through many towns, through many villages, and it is going to uproot people's lives forever. But the government say it's about the big picture and about thinking about the benefits that it can bring to the economy.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us. That's Paul Hawkins there, who's up in Euston Station talking about the controversy and the continuing controversy about HS2. Well, let's take a look at the GB Views inbox. As I've always said, you can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Dee says, "Hi, Arlene. I do not believe that either Jeremy Hunt or Rishi Sunak has the best interests of the people belonging to the UK at heart. First of all, neither of them were elected to their position. They had to oust 2 Prime Ministers to take their places in 10 Downing Street. Fraudulently, in my view. We are supposed to be a democratic country. Where is the democracy?" OK, thank you, Dee, for that. Let's talk about the Holocaust Memorial Day now. Bill says, "Hi, Arlene. As part of my 80th birthday, I'm going to Auschwitz, middle of February. I will be taking 2 of my grandchildren with me, aged 21 and 18, as I think it's important that youngsters know exactly what went on. I find it amazing that some folk don't believe it even happened." And Audrey says, "I've been to Auschwitz Memorial Centre. It was the most profound experience to witness the horror of man's hate. It must be taught and always visited." Thank you so much for getting in touch today. I hope you enjoyed the variety in the show today. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster. The show's back every Friday from 2 p.m. and up next, it's Patrick Christie's.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Most of us will have a dry weekend. Quite a lot of cloud around, but some sunny spells. Sunday will be a little bit milder than Saturday. High pressure is trying to control our weather, but kind of from a distance. And every now and then around the top of it, weather fronts are pushing southwards. And this one is going to bring some wet weather this evening across parts of western Scotland, starting off in the Western Isles, the Northern Isles, trickling into the mainland. And by the end of the night, we'll see some of that rain getting down towards Glasgow and also eking into Northern Ireland, but nothing too heavy. For most of England and Wales, it's a dry night. In the south, though, there will be a frost where we keep clear skies, and some dense patches of fog are also likely. -1, -2, that's towns and cities. Rural spots could get down to -5 or -6. So Saturday, a bit of a mixed picture. Fog and frost in the south, slow to clear. Thick cloud and drizzly rain for a time over northern England and North Wales. The north coast here may be a bit dank and drizzly, especially through the afternoon. Brighter skies, though, arriving for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A few showers will continue over the Northern Isles. Temperatures mostly at 6s and 7s, perhaps 7 or 8 on some western coasts. So generally a touch lower than they have been through today. On Saturday evening, again, most places will be dry. Just a little bit of drizzly rain around some of the coasts across Wales and a few showers in the far north of Scotland. But as I say, most places just dry and cloudy. Again, some fog is possible, but with more cloud around, perhaps not quite as cold, certainly in the south, as it will be overnight tonight.